because cookbooks are welcomed in people's homes. Like I always have this, it's not a good joke, but this joke that like, a cookbook is a book, like, it's always going to end well. like nothing bad's going to happen. Like it's this like safe, happy thing.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Julia Turshen is the author of 4 cookbooks, including the great new release, What Goes With What? 100 recipes, 20 charts, endless possibilities. It's a comprehensive guide to demystifying how to build cooking intuition and transform odds and ends into a meal. And we had a great conversation live at Rizzoli Bookstore all about making the book come to life, plus things like body acceptance and what constitutes queer food. We'll hope you enjoy listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rizzoli Bookstore. Thank you all so much for being here to celebrate What Goes With What by best-selling cookbook author and James Beard Award winner Julia Turshen. And she's joined tonight by Eliza Barbanel, writer, co-founder of Cake Zine, and contributing editor at Taste. And we are recording this live for the Taste podcast as part of our ongoing event series, This is Taste. So thanks so much to them, and thanks to Eliza. We're very lucky to have them here tonight. They'll be in conversation for about 40 minutes with some time at the end for audience questions. Please join me in welcoming Julia and Eliza.
Checking if the phone is silent.
Yeah, I just checked.
That's good to do. It's the first thing we do when we start a podcast. My name is Eliza Barbanel. I'm a contributing editor at Taste and one of the hosts of the podcast This is Taste, which we are recording live tonight through these mics with the assistance of our lovely producer, Clayton, the guy with the headphones. So thank you to Clayton for making this possible and Rizzoli for having us here again for another great live conversation. It's so fun to get to be here and to get to talk with Julia, who is really one of my favorite cookbook authors. I cook your food a lot. It's so like cozy and warming, and I think it'll be really fun to talk about everything today. And I guess to start, I just want to hear a little bit about what cooking is like in your life right now. You live in upstate New York. How are the leafs? Are they at peak leaf yet?
Yeah, the leaf peepers have arrived.
I am said leaf peeper. I'm going to come.
We welcome them. First I'll just say thanks to all of you for coming. This is so nice to be in such a beautiful bookstore, a place dedicated to this work that I love. Thanks for doing this. And yeah, I've got some friends and family here, so I really appreciate it. And to answer your question, what's cooking looking like?
Yeah, what's cooking looking like? And I am actually invested in how the leaves are doing.
Yes. They are starting to fall. They're starting to change colors. They're not at like the deepest yellow, orange, red, but it's not like this. But it's all happening. And, the thing, I'll answer your question about cooking, but the thing that I love to do, maybe as much as cooking, is mowing the lawn. And what happens this time of year is I get to mow over the leaves because they just act as mulch, which is really cool. So I don't know how I ended up talking about this in the first 5
You're like
minutes.
saying this to a New York audience also. Like mowing, I don't know what that is.
It's just great. If anyone wants to come on my riding lawnmower, just call me.
Yeah, I have to ask, do you have the kind you can like sit on and drive?
Yeah.
That's what makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, and I've got headphones. I listen to Beyonce and I drink Michelob Ultra while I do it. So that's really my life. And cooking I do when I'm not mowing. So I cook pretty much every day, but I cook very, very simply. And I think a lot of people, when I tell people how frequently I cook, or when someone talks to my spouse, Grace, and they're like, oh, you're married to a cookbook author, must be like gourmet meals all the time. And that's just not the case. We eat a lot of very simple food. We do live in a place that's close by to a lot of farms. And I pretend to work at one of them. I worked at a farm for a season. I still spend a lot of time there. And I bring home vegetables from there. So that's kind of what I base all my cooking around, is whatever vegetables I have to use up. But yeah, things are pretty simple. And when I say I cook every day, I'm not doing anything elaborate. It's a lot of air fryer moments. I love my air fryer, if you want to talk about it. It's quickly sauteing or stir frying something. It's making like some spaghetti. Like it's nothing fancy.
Everyday food.
Yes.
I want to talk more about the fact that you got to work on this vegetable farm that you had a CSA at. I think that's a dream that a lot of people have, maybe when, especially people who get a CSA, to work at that farm, and you actually went and did it. I'm curious, like, if you view vegetables or cooking differently after having that experience. It was 7 months, right?
Yeah, it was 7 months. It was the full growing season. It was like April through Thanksgiving. After my last cookbook, Simply Julia, came out, I had my, I guess, version of a midlife crisis, and I went and worked at the farm, and I just wanted a change of pace. I've been working on cookbooks forever, and it was an extraordinary experience. It was really hard. It was like physically hard, but I would say, I don't know that I learned so much. I mean, just the vocabulary of farming, the physical labor of farming, the teamwork of it. But yeah, I don't know that I learned so much new about vegetables. I think what I learned is just firsthand how much labor goes into making the food that we all eat. And obviously I like knew that, but to have that like embodied experience of doing that, I don't know, like shelled fresh peas should cost like $300. Like it's so much work.
I think I had a similar realization when I started baking bread at home for the first time. And even though it's not active time, the fact that it takes at least 2 days to make a loaf of bread, I was like, oh, this should be more money than I'm paying probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, an appreciation for the labor, the energy, seeing how hard my farmer friends work for very little money. And seeing just the consideration that goes into what it is to, turn the ground into food.
I really could talk about soil all day,
Yeah,
but
great.
I want to talk about your new book, What Goes With What, which is your 4th book. And I'm curious about how the idea for this book first kind of started germinating in your mind.
Sure. Oh, I like how you use germinating.
Oh,
when
I'm so
talking
glad.
about the farm. So this book, I would say, was born on Substack. It was born in my newsletter. So I started a newsletter, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And it was, after my last book came out, which I really felt like was my last cookbook. I felt like I did it. Like I had said all the things I could think of, and I thought I would just be a farmer. And then I started my newsletter, and I started doing these charts just as a way to explain whatever topic I was talking about. So one of the first ones was for soups, and I was writing this whole thing about soups, and I just thought, I would offer the chart as a way to show how I think about cooking, how I think about food. And I got such a wonderful and enthusiastic response. And it honestly surprised me, because I thought, oh, doesn't everyone think like this? Like I didn't realize not everyone does. And I kept hearing the feedback that this was seeing this chart. And I'll explain what it is, because this might be confusing if you don't know what I'm talking about. But seeing the chart for a lot of people helped them understand cooking in a way it hadn't before. And that was really exciting for me. So the charts, there's 20 of them in the book. I still do them in my newsletter all the time. They give you essentially like a formula for how to make something. So like soups, it's, I think you saute something, you add some liquid, maybe you throw something else in, put some herbs on top, and like you have a great soup. So presenting that formula, then examples for it, I think it just hopefully makes cooking seem a lot less overwhelming. I think a lot of my fellow home cooks feel very overwhelmed and feel like, wait, there's so many soups. How am I ever going to learn to make them all? Or, whatever it is. And I think when you realize they're all following basically the same formula, it just feels a lot more manageable. And I feel very invested in making home cooking feel manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really kind of heartened to hear that they started in the newsletter, because I subscribed to your newsletter and
thanks.
I started reading the charts, and I thought it was just such a brilliant way to be teaching like a cook's intuition, which is, I think, hard for people to learn, because there is a framework technique basically of how to make a pasta, how to make a stuffed vegetable, all of these things that you have charts for. And the charts are kind of an intermediary between saying like any liquid, any fill in. And these are 5 different kind of jumping off points that you have. And I'm curious, there's 20 charts in the book and then 5 recipes that kind of correspond with each category. Did you decide to make the charts first and then make the recipes, or was it kind of a flow between the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. The charts came first. I really wanted it to be like, what is the best example of this kind of formula, this infrastructure that I can give you, as opposed to trying to make a formula out of something, like trying to make that fit into it. So yeah, the charts were my priority, I guess. And yeah, it was really fun to just brainstorm all of this and to have the opportunity to think of more than one at a time. And then I started to think about the charts in terms of like, what do people turn to cookbooks for? What do people need help with? Also since my last book, in addition to the newsletter, I started teaching these online cooking classes. And I just feel between those two things, I'm just in this like constant conversation with the people who, feel pulled towards my work. And so I'm just asking them all the time, like, what are you looking for? What would make this easier? What's feeling overwhelming? What feels stressful? And I just try to do my best to listen. So a lot of the charts are in response to those kinds of things, like feeling like, I want to bake more, but I just like, do I need to buy a mixer? Like, this all feels like so much. How many different types of flour do I need to have? These kinds of questions. And, so there's a chart of, what did I call them? 1 bowl batters, which are just, you make the batter in 1 bowl. You don't need a whole equipment thing. And, that's how I like to bake. And so, yeah, so the charts came out of conversations like that.
Yeah, you mentioned these cooking classes that you do over Zoom, which I believe you started in 2021 when your last book came out, and that was kind of the way that a lot of cookbook authors were interacting with people. But you are special in that you've kept them going ever since. And I'm curious how you've kind of adapted the art of the online cooking class. Like, do people get the recipe ahead of time? And what do you find rewarding about that kind of structure?
Yeah, I love it. Has anyone here been to one of them? My parents are here and they've been to all of them.
We have some hands I've seen.
Thanks, guys. Jordan's been to some. So yeah, so if you haven't been to them, the way it works is I post it and then people sign up, and immediately when they sign up, they get recipes for whatever we're making in class. I write a grocery list that's organized by section of the grocery store, which I love doing. Any notes for like anything they need to do ahead of time, which is usually nothing. And yeah, then we get together. It's all on Zoom, and I join from my home kitchen. Other people join from theirs, and I would say we have a lot of fun. I spend a lot of time laughing. My mom takes these incredible illustrated notes while I'm cooking that I like to share on Instagram. They're even like better in person. But what I think is so amazing about it is that instead of me doing like a demonstration, and someone is watching me do the thing, they're doing it along with me. And I am someone who learns by doing. Like, if you told me all the things that a farmer does, I can listen and imagine it. But if I go to the farm and actually do it, that's a lived experience. It's an embodied experience. So I think that kind of thing happens in my classes, because I hear from a lot of people who are like, oh, I wouldn't have made this if I didn't do it in the class. So I love that kind of thing. And it makes me a much better teacher too, because people are asking me questions in real time while they're doing it. And, maybe I'm using a pan, I don't know, like a certain size cake pan or something. And then someone's like, well, I don't have that. I have this. Like, what do I do? And so we talk about it like in the moment. I also am like a human doing it. So I mess things up all the time. I drop things, I forget ingredients. And those are just like honest, real moments. And I think it's useful to explain to everyone, what is my thinking during this moment? Like, how am I answering this question? And it's nice too, because it also invites everyone else to offer their lived experience, because I am not the expert or authority on all of this. And I mean, Jordan, not to put you on the spot, but my pal Jordan is here, who also has a great Substack. It's a slice of, Save Me a Slice. Yeah, Jordan's an incredible baker. And like, there's times when, like, if I'm baking something in class and someone has a question, I mean, Jordan's a professional baker. You're more equipped to answer that than I am. So I love to open it up. And, if someone has celiac, and so they spend all their time figuring out the best way to make gluten-free versions of things. You know, I can give you my best educated guest, but I would much rather have someone who has the day-to-day experience kind of chiming in. So it becomes this kind of hive mind thing that's really cool. And yeah, it's mostly just like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of fun. And I think it's also interesting because a lot of cookbook authors have more of like a one-way direction interaction with their audience. Like maybe people will DM you on Instagram, you can have that back and forth, but it's not the same as like sharing space, even if that's kind of metaphorical space. And I'm curious if you had any questions or interactions that you found kind of helped you think about what are home cooks looking for when you were working on this book specifically?
I mean, I think a few things, but the first thing that's jumping to my head, and no one has directly asked me for this, but something I feel home cooks deserve. I don't know if they want this. I don't even know if they know they can want this. I just think they deserve more acknowledgement. And I think home cooking is this really important thing that so many of us do. And it's so much work, and it's often very unacknowledged work. And I am in this weird position of getting a lot of acknowledgement for my home cooking. You know, I write books about it. People come to a bookstore in Manhattan to listen to me talk about it. Like, this is weird. Most people are just making meals all the time and not getting the thanks and the recognition they deserve. So that's something I try to do a lot, whether, you know, through all different forms, whether it's sort of like in person but removed in my classes, or, you know, in my writing or whatever it is. And, you know, I just think that home cooking makes a really big difference in our day-to-day lives. And it's an activity I've done my whole life. My parents can confirm that. It's made a huge difference in my life. And yeah, and it is so much work because home cooks don't just make dinner. Like, I feel like anyone who chose to be here is probably someone who enjoys cooking at home, I'm assuming. And like, yeah, you all do so much. Like, you're grocery shopping, you're planning, you're budgeting, you're remembering the like half a frozen chicken in the freezer, you're keeping track of how many jars of, I don't know, tahini you have because you keep thinking you run out, but you haven't. So now what do you do with all the tahini? And then you're keeping track of like, oh, this week, this person in my house isn't eating this. And even though they did last week, and it's confusing.
There's a birthday coming up, and we need a cake.
Yeah. And then you make the meal, and then guess what? Then you have to clean up. And you have to do, it's so much work. So I think there's a lot of power in just saying, like, look at you go. Like, this is amazing. What you're doing is amazing. You're sustaining yourself, your household, whoever it might be, your family. And what you're doing is important. And I just think it's important to say that. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my soapbox.
It's a great answer, and like we're on a literal soapbox right now, so it's perfect for it. And I think it kind of ties into another thing I really noticed when I was reading this book, which is the essays that you have in it. I think there are all kinds of cookbooks out there, but I found it kind of unusual and beautiful to read an essay from you about like the merits of better than bouillon, which I agree is awesome. And then to also read an essay that's actually a conversation between you and your mom talking about body image, which actually was excerpted in Self magazine this week, where your mom was an editor-in-chief of the publication in the 90s, which was, unfortunately a big era for diet culture. And I just find it really honest, and I'm curious about what makes you want to include essays like that in a cookbook.
So Julie Will, who's my editor, who's unfortunately not here tonight, she wasn't feeling well, but Julie was my editor on Simply Julia as well. And she was I just feel very supported by her, and she really encouraged me to include more writing in my cookbook. So I started doing more of that, like in Simply Julia, adding these essays and stuff, which I've continued in What Goes With What. And I think cookbooks are just a cool thing. And I think that they're like a underrated vehicle for having conversations like the ones I just literally, like the one with my mom, like that we put in. Because cookbooks are welcomed in people's homes, I think, unlike any other form of media. And I think that's very powerful. Like, they're just seen as very friendly and welcoming. Like, I always have this it's not a good joke, but this joke that like, oh, a cookbook is a book, like, it's always going to end well. like nothing bad's going to happen. Like it's this like safe, happy thing, which is powerful. And I think it's good to take advantage of like the type of attention people give when they're in a cookbook, for things that are, yes, about food, but about all the things that come with food, because food touches, every single part of our lives. And so that's some of my answer, I guess. And I guess the other is that I just feel that getting to create books and publish them is just a huge privilege. And I think the best way I know how to honor that, I think, is to like just show up as my full self. And I think there's a lot of representation that can be had in something like a cookbook. And I grew up surrounded by print media. I'm just going to keep shouting out my parents because they're here. But yeah, they both worked in magazines and in designing books, and they designed this book, which is really cool, with the help of Steve, who's my unrelated brother. And so, I was surrounded by all this stuff, and I definitely felt like I saw a path for myself in making things like cookbooks. But yeah, I never like was reading cookbooks as a young kid written by like an openly queer woman who was like writing about like what she cooks for her spouse and all this stuff. And to get to do that in, again, a form as casual and as welcoming as a cookbook, I just feel like it's important. And I feel really grateful to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I really liked the essay on queer food that you had in this book as well. I also am queer, and I think in food media, like that's a term that's talked about all of the time with not a lot of like good, I think, digging into what that means and the varieties of things that it can mean. And when I was reading this essay, you said that it was the queerest book you've ever written, not because you're talking about your amazing spouse, but because of the charts. And I love that. And I'm wondering if you could talk about why you think charts are queer.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you asked. All right. So, I just basically think that living life as a queer person is awesome. And I think that, and I can only speak from my own experience, but it means that I'm someone who has had opportunities in my life to pause and just be like, do I want to do this the way it seems like everyone else is doing this? Like, are there other options here? And that is how I go through life. And with the charts, and just stay with me, I just think they're so queer, because it's like, you can make this all these different ways. Like, you can do it this way or that way or whatever. Like, all the ways are great. And I think just the idea of queering food, of asking like, oh, is there more than one right way to do something, is just something that makes me feel like a very relaxed home cook, a very confident home cook. I don't feel kind of stuck in following any norms. And, I think it's a nice way to cook. I think it's a great way to live. I don't know, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think charts definitely use all pronouns.
Yes. Can I ask you that question? Because you're a queer person in food media. Like,
what makes food queer?
Yeah, or what do you think when people talk about queer food?
I have like a whole group chat where we talk about this, because it's
Can I
such
get in on it?
Yeah. I'll add you after this.
Please.
Well, I really like what you say about how technique can have queer values. I think that hasn't something I've been thinking about. I think I've thought a lot about how it's the people who make it and the context that it's in. Like, actually, I wasn't going to say this, but one of your soup recipes from Simply Julia, I made for my friend when they had top surgery earlier this year. And it was like a perfect thing because they didn't need utensils. And it was really like nourishing and cozy. And in that moment, that felt very queer to me, because it was community care and it was a recipe made by a queer person, cooked by a queer person for a queer person. And I think restaurants can be queer, but I think that like, I don't know if like there's a version of a bagel that's queer. If maybe it's rainbow, but like that's not what queer is. Is that an answer?
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. I think it can be whatever we want it to be. But yeah, I think it's a term. I think this term queer food is used a lot in a way that sometimes just doesn't really mean anything. So it's nice to just pause and be like, what do we mean?
Yeah, I think it's a really expansive way of thinking, which I think is hopefully what queerness and food also can be for people. And also in that essay you talk about, I think it's called Full Fridge Club. Can you say more about that? I think this is really cool.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Full Fridge Club is this very wonderful super queer thing that I'm part of. So my friend Emmett he's a private chef. They've also got just this amazing, small but incredible commercial kitchen that he built out in Kingston, New York, which is the big city near where I live, and it's not a big city. And so Emmett cooks for all these private clients, and for a long time wanted to offer something at like a lower price point that could just help more people in the community have an easier time just having food around in their week-to-week life. So I started it with him because this was post-farm, and I wanted to continue to be doing something physical, something with community, with other people, because being a writer is mostly being at home by yourself with your computer. And I like doing things in person. This is really nice. And so, I joined Emmett, and I also have always done a lot of things in my community to like cook for people in my community in various ways. And I was looking for a new way to do that. So we built in this mutual aid part of it. So basically what it looks like, that's kind of how it started. And what it looks like is every Monday, we make a completely new menu. We change the menu every week. We have help by way of Steven, who helps us cook. We have a variety of people who help us with dishes, which is really important. Timmy is our like client person. She's in touch with everyone, which is great. And we make 6 different dishes every week. It's all vegetarian, but one is an optional meat thing. And we have a bunch of clients, and they come and pick up the food. And I feel like the best way to describe it is like we put excellent leftovers in your fridge, and then you can do whatever you want. And then for every client we put at least one meal, but it's usually more than that, but at least one meal into one of the free community fridges in Kingston. And I think it's just a really cool business. And I think watching how Emmett has figured out a way to cook professionally that does not come at the expense of his or his team's physical or mental health is amazing. And having it be like financially sustainable and like all these things that like the restaurant industry just makes really hard. But what I guess the 2 things that I love about it the most is one is just how much food we've been able to give to our community. We've put in 2 years, we've put over 2,000 meals in the community fridge, which for this tiny little kitchen is, I think, really cool. And I work with all queer and trans people, and it's like this beautiful place to go where that's just the norm, and sometimes we talk about this stuff, and sometimes we just don't. We just like exist together and talk about music, and which I know nothing about. And,
I was gonna ask what y'all are listening to while you're cooking. Oh my gosh,
you should ask Emmett, because I am always like, what is this music? What is this? I don't know. I love music. Sorry, Michelle, my friend Michelle's here. She works in music. I love music so much. I just don't know anything about it, which is, I think, why I enjoy so much.
You're along for the vibe and the ride.
Emmett is our DJ, and Emmett is so knowledgeable about this, and I like when he puts on Dolly.
I want to bring it back to the charts once more, because there was a sandwich chart, which I love, and I'm curious if you could tell me the difference between like a decent sandwich and a really good sandwich.
Yeah, sure. Because I love sandwiches. So the sandwich chart is actually a chart I reference often when people ask me about this book, because I think it's a great illustration of the charts, because the sandwich that inspired the chart is the BLT, which I feel like we're all familiar with, whether or not you eat bacon. And I think it's a classic for a reason, because I think it's a perfect sandwich. It's so good. And I think when you look at all the parts of a BLT, you get the formula for a great sandwich. So it's like, you've got the bread, of course, that's important. Then you have like the main thing, the bacon, but that could be whatever. You have a creamy thing, because I think BLTs need a lot of mayo. You have a crunchy thing and lettuce. And then the real kicker is like having like a sort of extra thing that's a little acidic. So in a BLT, it's the tomato. I feel like you take out any part of the BLT and it's like fine, but it's not amazing. So I think if you want an amazing sandwich, I think you just need all those parts, and they can come in so many different forms, but I think that sandwich gives you the framework for all great sandwiches. So I just feel like I think the thing that's missing for most sandwiches is that like extra thing that doesn't necessarily need to be there, and it's a little acidic. So it could be like a pickle or like a pepperoncini pepper or something, like just something a little briny and acidic and just great. My dad makes the best sandwiches. He should answer this. Sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut.
Good answer, Doug. Yeah.
I have to tell you about the best BLT that I made this summer,
Please.
which was
This is what I want to know.
this idea of like elote mayo.
Oh.
So just like boiled corn, cut it off the cob, mix it in with the mayo. So many people are nodding along with me as I talk about this. It's awesome.
Are you pureeing the corn or are you just stirring it in?
No, so I went to Edith's Grocer in Brooklyn and they did a BLT that had corn just kind of nestled in it. Obviously, it was a very messy sandwich. So I thought this, but just a lot more mayo. So it kind of is suspended in the mayo and then you just smear it on with everything else.
Sounds great.
Then I did like elote potato salad along. It kind of like opened up a lot of doors for me.
You went down the elote.
Yeah. Also, then I did a Caesar BLT, which you have a Caesar pasta in the book, which I think is so cool.
Yeah.
I feel like the Caesar pasta, is that just like really good marketing, or were you thinking about a salad and made a pasta? Like, how did that one come together?
So that recipe is basically all the elements of great Caesar salad dressing, which I of course like to call Julius Caesar, and it always makes me laugh. And so you
Wait, I didn't get that when I read it, but when you just said it, okay.
Yeah, you have to say it out loud to get it. My like back burner plan is I just want to run a salad dressing company because I can call it Julius Caesar. And then my mom says it'll be successful and we can live in the house that Julius Caesar built. It's just so good. So anyway, the pasta is all the elements of a great Caesar salad dressing. So like olive oil, anchovies, Parmesan, all that stuff blended together and poured on spaghetti. And then you have it with a fried egg because the egg's usually like in the dressing. And it's just really delicious and like really fast and easy. Yeah, some lemon juice in it. You blend it all together. Wait, I'm telling you what it is. But your question was, how did it come to be?
How did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so I think I came up with it because I was doing a pasta chart and thinking about, pasta is such a huge category. Obviously, there's like a million books just about pasta. And they're wonderful, and all pasta is great. But for this one chart, like for these 5 examples, what I was thinking about was, I'm always thinking about just my fellow home cooks. So I was thinking about like what's someone throwing together for dinner on, a Wednesday night when you're going to get home later than you planned because you were so nice to come to this. That kind of pasta. So to me, that kind of pasta has like a few things that you just throw together, and it seems so simple, and it is so simple. But if you have the right things together, it's going to be really good. So that Caesar spaghetti has all the things.
Do you just like think about your entire life in charts now that you've done this book?
Oh, not now that I've done this, but I've been thinking about my life in charts forever and in lists forever. I've spent my parents know this because I keep sending them old pictures. I've been spending the last few weeks like going through just piles of things I've held on to. And yeah, I've been making these charts and lists since I could like hold a pen. I just didn't really think about sharing them in this way until now. So yeah, it's just continuing for me. It's not a new thing.
I have like a theory about the charts that I'm wondering if I can get your thoughts on.
Please.
This is developing as we've been sitting talking together. But I feel like we're at an interesting moment in food culture where so many people have been cooking and there's so much knowledge and information about cooking that I think has been available for obviously ever, but especially after the pandemic. I think a lot of people think about cooking more seriously. And when I look at cookbooks, I think about like Carla Lawley Music has a cookbook where she has like a spin it section at the bottom that's telling you how you can riff on it. I think certainly like online, New York Times Cooking, Bon Appetit, they'll talk about ways that you can experiment more than before. Do you think that like this chart is a part of like a larger shift in terms of home cooks feeling more empowered, or maybe cookbook authors knowing that home cooks are empowered to have more of guidelines?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I hope they're part of that conversation. I feel like this feeling of empowerment that comes when you cook intuitively with some confidence, when you're like, oh yeah, I'm out of this, but like I'll just use this and it's gonna be fine. That feeling, I just think is so wonderful. Like, and sort of running joke or tension I've had in my whole life is that I write recipes for a living, but I never ever follow them. I mean, I test them, of course, but like when I'm just cooking dinner, I'm not following a recipe. And so I'm constantly like, what am I doing? Writing these recipes, like, is this really actually helpful? Like, if I want to help people feel the way I feel when I'm just throwing together dinner, like, our recipe is the best tool for this job. And I think they're important and they serve a role. But I've always tried to, offer tons of riffs and substitutions. And in my very first book, In Small Victories, at the end of every recipe, there was a section called spin-offs where I gave you like, the whole crux of that book was like every recipe had a quote unquote small victory, like a little tip or technique. And so once you could do that, not only could you make the recipe, you can make like so many things. So, that's been a thread in my work forever. Like in my classes, I just go on and on about all the different things you could substitute. Grace was like, you could just tell them how to make the thing. Like I tell you all the ways to make it into something else. So that has been part of my work forever. I think the charts are a continuation of that. And I think the best way I've found to show it kind of rather than tell it. And I think, I don't know, I'm delighted to hear, I don't follow food media as closely as I used to. Sorry if that offends you.
It's okay. It's for the best.
But I'm delighted to hear that you feel like you're seeing that in more and more places, because I think that when we have a more flexible approach to cooking, it's just better for everyone. Because it's like, obviously I take this stuff really seriously. I've devoted my life to it. And it's also just dinner. Like, it's just like, eat whatever. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, it's just dinner. Well, we're going to do audience questions, but before we do that, I want to play a quick rapid fire section with you. So I'll give you a category and then you're going to have to play favorites and tell me like the first answer that comes into your head.
Okay, this is nerve-wracking.
It'll be great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, your favorite season for cooking?
Oh, right now, especially in New York State. Honestly, right now, mid-October. Especially with my like long season farm perspective, like everything is so good right now. There's like the greens are just perfect. There's too much of them to even know what to do with. Just like squash is coming in. The apples are great. But we still have like nice tender stuff like scallions and arugula and stuff.
And also it's not too hot to turn on the oven.
Yeah. And it's like also, and it's cool enough to like eat hot and warm stuff, but not so cold that like you don't also want cold. It's just perfect. Right now is great.
Your favorite restaurant upstate New York?
I guess my house.
Your house.
We don't really go anywhere. I would say my friends Lacey and Michelle are here, is where we went together, which is Stissing House, which I think is incredibly special. It's not in the area where Grace and I live, but it's just, that building is, it's like from like the 1700s. I just think it's an incredible space. And for me, the point of going to a restaurant actually is usually not so much about the food. It's about just getting out of my house and going to a different space. And that space is so special. And the food is so good. And it just is, I don't know. I haven't been to another place like that. And I think that's cool. Mm-hmm.
A favorite cookbook that's not one of your cookbooks?
Okay, I'll answer that, but can I also give you one more restaurant?
Yes. You went from zero to a bunch.
Yeah, thanks. Is Harana Market, which is really close to me, which is amazing Filipino food run by this like really cool queer couple, and it's just changed our county for the better, and I think it's incredible. Okay, favorite cookbook that's not mine? Well, this is a hard question. So many. I mean, off the top, okay, two.
Yeah.
May I? Okay. Contemporary one is Cheryl Day's Treasury of Southern Baking, I think is a phenomenal book that no one else besides her could have written, and her recipes are flawless, and it's wonderful. And an older book, which my parents will be delighted to hear, is Lee Bailey's Country Weekends. And I think that book has inspired me more than any other. I've like carried my copy around for over 30 years, and like it was in my college dorm room, and I used to like bring it with me on trips. Like I didn't want to be away from it. So yeah.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Your go-to bagel order?
Oh, Yeah. Okay. So the type of bagel varies, but always toasted. And it could be anything savory. Like sometimes I want everything, but it's messy. And sometimes I just want a toasted pumpernickel because I want the flavor, but less messy. Or I'll do sesame or poppy. But anyway, those scallion cream cheese, but not too much. Very thinly sliced lox, very thinly sliced red onion, capers, and a lemon on the side if they have it.
Your go-to late night snack?
Oh gosh, so many. Well, I don't stay up very late, so I don't know if it's a late night.
Whatever your concept of late night would
like
be.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, your 8 p.m. late night snack.
What was my most recent? The other night I had some pita chips dipped into this like garlic cream cheese spread. I got at Adams, which is the great grocery store in the Hudson Valley. Yeah, I like a crunchy thing dipped in a soft thing, and that can be any number of things. Yeah.
That's pretty perfect.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, final question. A fictional food scene, like from a book or movie, TV show that you wish you could eat in real life?
So many. I think Big Night when they have the, what is the thing called?
Timpano?
Timpano. I mean, that scene is like seared in my memory. I also love in that movie when like at the end of it or like the next morning when he makes like the omelet and just like, it's just like the eggs in the pan and some bread on the side after that huge thing. Yeah, I remember that really well.
Yeah, those are great. And now we're going to open up to questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Did you ever consider not putting recipes for any of the dishes that were in the chart and kind of sending people off to, come up with it on their own?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I had a moment with this book where I was like, should this be a cookbook without recipes? Like, should I just describe how to make this stuff? And I feel like recipes serve a really important purpose. And I wrote this essay in my last book about, this might sound like a far story, but it relates. So I took, whatever, you don't need the whole backstory, but I took this singing workshop once over a weekend because I'm obviously not afraid to talk in front of people, but I was like, singing terrifies me. So I was like, oh, go towards the thing that scares you. So I went and did this workshop for a weekend, and we spent the whole weekend, we had a teacher singing and we would sing back, we would repeat what we heard. And it was like amazing. Like it was like terrifying, but like, good terrifying. And I spent the whole weekend singing my little heart out. And then I came home, I drove home, and Grace was like, because I was like off my phone for the weekend, Grace was like, how was it? And I was like, it was amazing. And Grace was like, well, sing me something. And I was like, and I realized I couldn't remember any of it. Like it all went out of my head. I was so present. But I couldn't remember a thing. And I feel like that's when it clicked for me of like, oh, this is why recipes matter. Because like you can watch someone make something, you can cook it with them. Like you can come to my class, cook the thing with me. But if you don't have the recipe and you're not a singer, it's going to be hard. And so I think it's good to have that thing there. I think it serves a really good purpose. But yeah, my hope and dream for this book is like, you look at the charts, you see the recipe, maybe you make one or two of the recipes because you're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of getting it. And then you feel more comfortable to go off and make your own thing. And like I'm delighted for anyone and everyone to follow as many or all of the recipes. And I'm like really delighted to see what people make that have nothing to do with what I suggested.
So I was an avid home cook, had a kid, and now I find it exhausting and very difficult. So I love the idea of charts and to be able to riff and like not have analysis paralysis. Two questions.
I love that.
Would love to know what's in your freezer, and then how do you stay energized to keep on cooking?
Oh, yeah, great questions. Our freezer is pretty packed. I'm just going to throw you under the bus again, Mom and Dad, because I feel like the funniest thing my mom ever says is you always, like when you have leftovers, you're like, well, I don't want to throw it away. Like I'll freeze it. But in 6 months, you're going to throw it out. So she refers to it as her frozen garbage. I feel like you're better about it. No, much better, much better. Yeah, because I taught you. Just kidding. So I freeze a lot of things, but I feel like, and I'll tell you what's in my freezer, but I think the important thing is to use what's in your freezer and have it not just be the place where things go to die. This time of year, I bring home so many greens from the farm, like kale and collards, stuff like that, and I rinse them off and then I just throw them in a pot so that they get like a little soft, like they steam. And then I throw them in Ziploc bags and I have them like for the whole winter. We always have frozen dumplings, like a variety of them, not ones I've made, like ones I buy at H Mart when I drive home from the city. Those are really handy. I mean, a variety of ice cream. We're a big ice cream bar, like an ice cream treat family. Like if you come to our house, you'll get options. I think those are good. I'm sure there's some stuff I've forgotten about. We have a variety of squirrel food from when my spouse was rehabilitating wild animals, and that's still in there because it keeps. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And garlic. Oh yeah, I make this garlic paste. Thanks, Mom. When the garlic harvest happens at the farm, I take home a ton. I peel it all, which I do while I watch Bravo. And then I put it in the food processor with some olive oil, and I spread this paste out on like a parchment-lined sheet, and then I cut it into cubes, and I keep it in a Ziploc in the freezer so that I don't have to peel or mince garlic for like months at a time.
When you use it, do you thaw it or do you just throw it in?
I just throw it in, unless I'm sautéing it, because then it burns before it melts. And for that, I just either try to remember to take it out like 15 minutes before because it's small, or I throw it in the microwave for like 5 seconds. You asked me another question, I can't remember because I got so excited about the freezer.
How do you have the energy continue to cook?
I think that I'm in it for the long haul. So it's part of why I cook so simply, because I just want to keep doing it. So I don't want to make it overly complicated. There's also plenty of times when I say, Grace, it's not even that I need Grace or anyone else to cook. I just need someone else to make the decision, like the decision fatigue of what to make. So sometimes I ask Grace to just decide. So I'm not afraid to ask for help. I think also, I bring home a share from Full Fridge every week, what I was talking about. So there's like a lot of food, like we eat a lot of leftovers. So I'm not, even though I'm cooking every day, I guess it's worth saying when I say that, I didn't define what I mean as cooking. I think cooking is like putting some food together. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I think if you make a peanut butter and jelly, you've cooked, like you've made food, like you've done it. And I think it's worth acknowledging that. So, I guess I keep it simple, and I'm not afraid to ask for help.
So this book seems to me you have like a home run of like greatest hits, soups, salads, and then you get to savory pies. So tell me about so now all of a sudden I'm, again, season time, right? Inspired for these savory pies more than just chicken pot pie, which I was never a huge fan of. So can you sort of talk us like how that became in the hit parade?
Yeah, great question. So I love chicken pot pie, so I'll eat yours. And I think that one came about, my classes inspired a lot of this book too, just the things I made in my classes, again, all the questions that have come up. And I did, there's a vegetarian savory pie that's like roasted tomatoes and white beans that you put polenta on top, and you don't even have to make the polenta. You can get like the tube at the grocery store and just cut it into rounds. And it's like the easiest thing. It's like a can of beans, like cherry tomatoes, like you barely have to do anything. And everyone seemed to really love it. And it just like seemed to surprise people. And they were like, oh, this can be dinner. And like, it's beautiful. And so that's when I was like, oh, savory pies are a cool thing. Cause I think, they're casseroles, like it's like a one pot thing. So I think that's always appealing. And I just think they're the kind of thing that like, I think people used to make them more often, that kind of stuff, like a casserole, a pot pie, and I just think they're super comforting, and I like food that makes you feel taken care of.
I really want to eat, there's like a sweet potato puree lentil pie. It's like a shepherd's pie. I think I let out a small gasp to myself when I got to that one because it just looked so good. And I think that one of the benefits of a savory pie is that it's a whole meal in one, right? You have your like protein and your vegetable side and your starch. And then it makes you feel like you could be Mickey Mouse and like floating on the scent of the pie throughout your house a little bit.
I love that. That's what I'm going to imagine now. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Jordan.
I wanted to know, you took almost every photo in this book yourself, which is kind of rare. And I was wondering what part of that experience was rewarding or challenging.
Sure. Yeah, I took like nearly all of them, and then the person who took the rest of them is sitting next to you, actually, is Natalie Chitwood, who's an incredible photographer, and we spent just the best day together to take all the photos that I was incapable of, including all the photos of me. And yeah, that was just the best. And but yeah, the photos I took, like nearly all the recipe photos, that sort of, you asked me what I learned from doing that. Yeah, I guess I learned that I can make a cookbook and not lose my mind, because producing a cookbook photo shoot is, I mean, you've been part of them, I know, like, you know how many moving parts it is, how much work it is. It's, to me, one of the hardest parts of making a cookbook is producing the photos for it. And when I went in to do this book, because as I mentioned, I thought my last book was my last book, and I made a promise to myself, if I was going to do this one, could I just, again, the queer thing, could I pause and be like, is there another way to do this? Like, the parts of this that have historically given me just like a lot of anxiety, like, is there a way to alleviate some of that? And well, I've gotten to work with so many cool people through the years on the food photos, making them all happen very quickly, which I tried to do because it's very expensive, so you want to do it as fast as possible, has just been really, really hard. So I thought, is there another way? And then when I thought about the possibility of taking them myself, I just got really excited because I was like, oh, here's another way I get to be creative. And then the other part of it was, because I wasn't paying for like a whole huge photo shoot, it meant that I could afford however many photos I wanted, which meant I got to do the thing I've always wanted to do but have never been able to do, which is provide a photograph for every single recipe in the book, which I think is so important, because most recipes that don't have photos just get skipped over. And not only that, I just think we all learn in so many different ways. Like the charts revealed to me, like, yeah, this is how my brain works. And watching the charts connect with other people, I'm like, oh yeah, other people's brains are like mine. And then some people are like, need a photo, like total visual learners. Like a photo gives you so much information. So yeah, they're like pretty and beautiful and all, I mean, I don't know if mine are, but like, you know, photos are great, but they're also just like a tool to give you more information. So yeah, those are some of the things I learned. But yeah, I love doing it.
So did you shoot like each recipe when it was finished at home by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. So rather than like pack everything into like a week, I would just, so my process is I write my recipes before I test them. I kind of like imagine how I think I'll make it. And then I print it out. I have a printer. And I go
Printer and a driving mower.
and a driving, I'm just living all my dreams. And yeah, I go to the kitchen with my red pen and my piece of paper, and I test my recipes, and I do it as many times as I need. And when I feel like I've gotten it right, for this book, I would then, whatever plate I put it on, I would go to my little table outside and take a photo. And so it was very slow. It took me like the better part of a year to do it all. But it was fantastic, and it just made it feel very relaxed. It also meant I could go back and look at things and redo things if I wanted to. And yeah, it's super like fun, creative stuff. Like I got to run my favorite errand, which was to buy lumber. And I bought like these thin pieces of plywood, and I painted a bunch of them. And some of them I like took a newspaper and scratched them just to make different backgrounds to put the dishes on. But other than that, there was no like formal prop or food styling, because it was important to me that when you look at the pictures, it looks like how I would make it if you were coming over. And I didn't want the photos to feel unattainable. Like I didn't want someone to cook the recipe and be like, but mine doesn't look like that. And also I think, I mean, prop stylists are so cool. Like it's such a cool job, but it was important to me to not pretend I own 100 different patterns of a plate. Like we eat off of the same dishes frequently. Like that's what most people do. So like you'll see things reappear in the photos because that's true to my life.
Yeah, it feels lived in, which I think is one of the highest compliments for a cookbook, because a good cookbook is covered in stains and rips, and it is lived in that kind of way.
Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more if anyone has one.
So my firstborn child is queer and recovering from an eating disorder, and they're about a year into that journey, and I had one too when I was younger. And I was just wondering, your mom's here too, if you have any advice for me as how I can best support them. We both also love food and cooking.
That's such a generous question, and I appreciate you sharing that. Do I have any? I mean, I'm curious what my mom would say. I guess, I'll pass it to you, Mom, if you're open. My advice would be to just remind them that you're there and that you've opened ears and you're willing to listen, and then to listen to whatever they say. And I think acknowledgement is incredibly powerful. And I think there's a lot of open space that comes after that very hard moment of acknowledgement. That can be like, there's a lot of connection there, a lot of fun. Hold on, you're getting a mic because you're being recorded.
Thank you. I think the only thing I would add to that is ask your daughter how she feels, with no expectation of what the answer would be, and maybe I'll get back to you later on that. I think we all sort of live in a microwave world, wanting something happen and be gratified by it instantly. And some of these things take a lot of time and a lot of patience. I mean, Julia literally asked me not to talk about dieting, and we didn't. And it was hard not to, because I think about it all the time. And so I'm sure it's on your mind all the time. But I think the best thing is time, and her knowing that you're there, and asking when appropriate, how do you feel? And it doesn't you don't have to say much, because I would always want to solve everything. I was, let me take you here, let me do this, let me see how we could fix this. Well, it takes time. I wish you lots of love and luck.
Yeah, I do too, and I think the fact that you're the kind of parent that's asking is meaningful also. And actually, while we have Mama Turshen close to a microphone, I want to ask a question, because Julia talked about being someone who always loved to cook, and I'm curious if you have any notable meals that Julia cooked as a child.
Well, her first dinner party was when you were, 5 or 7? We all came, the men came in black tie.
It was required.
It was required.
Which is obviously still the case for all of your dinner parties today.
It was,
and now this is as dressed up
it was
as I get. I got it out of my system.
It was a Valentine's celebration, and she made these beautiful sandwiches. One side was pumpernickel, one side was white. Then she cut out the heart and she reversed them with jelly in the middle. And that was the first of many wonderful, wonderful. The funny thing about when Julia learned to cook, here we go. Julia never knew that after you cooked, you had to wash the dishes, because on television, when you see the cooking, you never know that they're washing the dishes. So that was, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And yes, she made charts and lists forever.
I have to say, I don't think the cutout sandwiches are on the sandwich chart in the book.
I know,
but
it's a missed opportunity.
Maybe in the next one.
The second printing.
It'll be scribbled into everyone. And thank you to everyone for coming here tonight. I know that Julia will be signing books in the corner afterwards if you have more questions for her. And this episode will be everywhere you can get your podcasts later this month if you had such a good time that you want to listen to it again.
Yeah, thank you all. And thank you so much. Your questions are great.
This is Taste is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things happening.